Hey, Pindude here. Welcome back to My Vintage Pinball. Today's video is going to be a quick walk around tour of my pinball workspace. My workspace here is my single car garage, attached garage at my house. I've spent quite a bit of time the last couple months getting it reorganized and make it a little more efficient for working on pinball machines. So I'll show you what I've done. I'll show you some of the equipment I have. Some of the equipment that's important to restoring pinball machines, and we'll get going on that. Also, I just wanted to say my inspiration for getting back into these videos is all the great people that have supplied content to the pinball community, including all the great YouTube channels, Twitch channels, pinball podcasts. There's just an endless amount of pinball content put out by the community, and I wanted to be able to put something back into the community myself. And then I found this YouTuber that has a newer channel within the past year. He's also on Pinside. His YouTube channel is Pinball Workshop, and watching his videos really inspired me to get back into doing my videos, as his videos are very similar to what I was doing 7 years ago and what I will continue to do now. So once again, Pinball Workshop on YouTube. Check him out if you haven't checked out his videos, and make sure you give him a subscribe. Alright, let's get on with the tour. Alright, so here's an overview view of the shop. I'm back by the garage door now. You can see some of the workbenches, and the middle I kind of use as the workspace for working on the cabinet. This is my main workbench. It's the longer of the workbenches in the shop. This is where I do a lot of my rebuilding of assemblies, cleaning parts, board work. Pretty much majority of what I do is done on this workbench. So I have a lot of my most used tools hanging on the wall. There's some chemicals. So let's zoom in and check out what's here. Alright, so on this main workbench, I do a lot of my soldering here. So here's my trusty old Tenma soldering iron. Also the soldering cleaner and a solder deputted desoldering tool. Got your electrical, these are the Heiko cutters and small needle nose, all your nut drivers, screwdrivers, pliers, knives, scissors, some sanding tools, and then the little power screwdrivers that I use when disassembling playfields. I typically won't assemble a playfield with a power tool, but I definitely use those screwdrivers to disassemble the playfield. And then also on this workbench I have a older computer. It's actually a Windows XP computer that's been out here for a long time. But it actually works out really good because I have one of the older flat HP 4670 scanners, the ones that you can just plop up on the side of a cabinet or on top of a playfield and scan it. And HP dropped support of that scanner on either XP or Windows 7, so this allows me to continue to use the original HP software that came with it and makes it much easier. The actual computer is actually mounted way up there, up by the ceiling. That way it doesn't take up any space on the workbench or anything. Also, I have some of these baskets that hold chemicals and stuff like that. There's more down here. And the other trick, I learned this, I was in somebody else's workspace, and I saw that they had their battery chargers mounted on the wall, and I immediately came home and mounted mine on the wall because I had them on the workbench taking up space. These are the battery chargers for all my power tools, drills, saws, stuff like that. So all those are mounted on the wall. Alright, so just off to the left of that main workbench is another workbench, but this is the Playfield Rotisserie area. I also have that TV mounted on the wall, which is currently got the straight down the middle YouTube channel on there. If you haven't checked out those guys, make sure to check them out because they're pretty awesome. So this TV is also useful for plugging a USB stick with your before pictures, and then you have a nice big view of your before pictures. So that comes in really handy for that. It's also, of course, great for watching YouTube channels, whether it be these guys or Todd from TNT being a couple of my favorites. And then mounted on top of that is a Vizio soundbar. The advantage to that is it has Bluetooth, so I can connect it via Bluetooth from my phone and listen to pinball podcasts while I'm out here working. Again, this wall is full pegboard, so you can hang tools and stuff on there. And let's move into my Playfield Rotisserie. This is a earlier Rec Games pinball design. It's really simple. It's just 2x4s and some plumbing parts and a couple metal L channels. You can see on this wall, I just mounted a 2x4 on the wall. And then on this side, I made this little T. I just made this little T out of 2x4s. And the advantage to that is I can move, by taking 2 screws out, I can move this to change the length of what playfield I'm working on. Like down here, I have it marked for early solid state, modern solid states, including System 11. There's even a marking out here from when I did a black hole playfield, because that playfield's a little longer. So it's just unbolting 2 screws, moving it, screwing it back down into this wooden workbench. And it makes it really nice. These connectors I have on my rotisserie are really neat. I don't know what they're called, but you find them in the plumbing supply section. And it's just got this big nut that attaches to 2 pieces, so I can actually take this piece off when I'm not working on a playfield, store them somewhere else, and then I have more access to the playfield. Usually I'll take the support off too if I'm not doing a playfield at the moment. So the advantage to these, you just tighten these down and with a wrench, and when these things are tight, that playfield's not going to pivot on you or anything. And then you just loosen them just a little bit, and you're able to pivot the playfield, flip it completely upside down. So I also mounted under the TV here, there's a halogen, one of those halogen work lights that you can get pretty cheap nowadays. And that really illuminates the top of the playfield. I'm getting pretty old, I need all the light I can get. So up above the TV is, it's a 220 volt shop garage heater. I got that from northern.com. I've probably had that for 12 or 13 years now. That thing puts out a lot of heat. It allows me to clear coat playfields and do painting out here in the cold New Jersey winters. The disadvantage to it is electric, and it uses a lot of electricity, so it's kind of expensive to use. So if I'm not doing any painting or clearing, I'll just use it to keep the garage comfortable enough to work out here in the winter. But if I do need to crank it up, it does a very quick job of heating this garage up anywhere up to 70 degrees if I need to. So underneath the workbench that I use as the Playfield Rotisserie is where I keep my Craftsman 30-gallon air compressor. This air compressor is about the minimum that I would want. It's actually not quite enough if you're using a lot of air sanders or stuff. But for using your blowgun, your air staplers, air nailers, my HVLP paint gun, it's been plenty. I've had this air compressor for going on 25, 27 years. Never had a problem with it. The main thing is to keep the drain on the bottom, just make sure there's no moisture in it. And then next to that is probably from Home Depot or Lowe's. It's a 25-foot hose reel. 25 feet makes it all the way to my garage door. So I'm able to basically use anything just on that reel. And then I have an extra 50-foot air hose there in case I'm sanding in the driveway or something where I don't want to make a big mess in the garage. I'm able to work out there. So underneath my main workbench, I have some of these plastic, I don't even know what you call them, these little plastic drawers that you get at like Walmart in the home goods section. This particular one here is where I keep painting supplies, sandpaper, and then that bottom drawer is a bunch of miscellaneous hardware, bolts and nuts and stuff like that. And then over here I have a bunch of painting supplies, paint brushes, and some adhesives and polishing stuff. And then here is my rack of acrylic paints. Now these are just the craft store paints that are typically anywhere between $1 and $1.50 a bottle. And this is what I use for all my Playfield touch-ups. I know some people swear by more expensive acrylics, but at $1 or $1.50 a piece, you can afford to get a lot of these in all kinds of various colors, and you can typically match what you're doing with these. They also do not bleed under automotive clear coat. I've never had any bleeding problems. They're virtually under clear coat disappear, and as long as your color match is good, you almost can't see the touch-ups. So I've been using these. Some of these bottles are upwards of over 10 years old and they're still good. So, all right, so moving next to my Pinball Rotisserie tool, workbench, I have this Craftsman toolbox, which although is filled with a bunch of tools that may not be pinball related, as I also work on cars, I do keep a lot of pinball stuff in here. And you can see I labeled the drawers with one of those Brother P-Touch things. Just makes things a little bit easier to not have to be searching through the drawers. So I have a lot of my electrical stuff in here. Here's my Fluke. This is an old Fluke 77 meter. All my wire strippers, wire ties, stuff like that. This drawer up here has got a bunch of pinball tools, fuse pullers, and switch adjusters. Of course, a headlight for working on pinball. And this is handy. This is one of those Craftsman digital levels, and it also has an incline meter for setting your game up in the game room, getting the pitch right and the level right. And then down here, another really handy tool that took me a while to buy. I was actually using a hand stapler for a while. This is the Unicatch 22 gauge upholstery stapler with the long nose, really important for doing pop bumper wires and stuff like that. But it's really handy for getting the ground braid on the bottom of the playfields and inside the cabinets. So if you don't have one of these, I would highly recommend it. I think it's about $65 on Amazon. I also have a heat gun. I also have a hair dryer over here because the hair dryer comes in handy too when you don't want to burn something, because the heat gun gets awfully hot. Most of these upper drawers are combination wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, a bunch of stuff that I don't use as often, so that's why it's not hanging on the wall. And then up top I have a bunch of clamps and some other magnetic trays and stuff that I'll use as I'm pulling parts off of playfields. This is another cool thing that I got more recently. These are little ball punches, and they're real helpful on the playfield for knocking down the high spots that are left by screws and stuff. Next to that toolbox is another little toolbox that I also have labeled. There's also another small workbench here. In this toolbox, it's basically consumables. Here's my old hand staplers. Keep my staplers in here. Hot glue sticks. Here's some manual incline meters for setting up playfields. And some more consumables, disposable rags and stuff. Here's my microfiber and diaper cloth rags that I use. And then here's one of my favorite tools, and I'm surprised that I found out that this is discontinued. This is the Wen 4-inch buffer. I use this for buffing playfields, buffing cabinets, removing wax, using buffing with Nuvis 2. And it uses these little 4-inch discs that I get off of eBay. I think a whole bag like this is only like $4 or $5, so you're able to not have to reuse them as much as you would if you were using more expensive ones. And then another little workbench here, which is basically just storing, this is the wire and harness as it came out of my dishwasher. So I just have that on there so they stay nice and clean. And then these boxes are just the boxes that I use. They got a bunch of holes in them. I put my bolts in there and then spray paint the heads of the bolts. So just some miscellaneous stuff up there. Up on the ceiling here, I have a couple Playfields hanging up there. I try not to have to replace Playfields, but sometimes they're just so blown out that these two particular games, one's a 78 Williams Phoenix and one is a Pinball. They were just a little worse than I would have liked, and I was able to source some cheap replacement Playfields that were in better condition. So above the door going into the house, I made a little shelf, got some paint supplies up there, but more importantly, some of my most important pinball tools that I would say is the vibrating tumblers. So the one on the right there is the Berries tumbler. I've had that one for probably 10-12 years. I've never had a motor fail or anything on it. And the one to the left there, I just got that one. That's the one that you could get from Amazon. It's only $39.99, I think. Whereas the Berries is $72 now. This Amazon one, it's almost the same size. It works just as good. There is one small modification you need to make to it to make it work as good as the Berries one. And I'm going to cover tumblers probably in my next video, so we'll go over them. But there's really no other way to, all these zinc coated parts in the playfield, there's no other way that I've found to get them looking as good as you can in a vibrating tumbler. So if you don't have one of those, that is one of my most recommended tools. On the shelf next to that, in that gray box there, that's just a hand router that I use on the bad occasion that I need to replace a back of a head or a back of a pinball cabinet that's been water damaged. And then next to that is my Ryobi, it's a 5-inch random orbit sander, electric, plug into the wall sander that I use for sanding cabinets if I have the unfortunate pleasure of having to repaint a cabinet. That comes in real handy. Next to that's a Harbor Freight 7-inch automotive buffer that uses the big 7-inch pads. Use that for all my final buffing on the clear coats that I put on the automotive playfields. And then under that is another little workbench. And then I have a bunch of these nut and bolt cabinets that you can buy, and all my extra spare parts that I use on a pinball machine. Over here, this is all extra white rubbers, so if I ever have a broken rubber, or at least I always have some spares. Some of these may be getting a little old and yellowed at this point, but and then a bunch of consumables, Q-tips, felt tapes, and double stick tapes, stuff like that. Up here is a bunch of pinball hardware, posts, nuts, bolts, stuff like that. I have a lot of extra fuses, and then there's a lot of electrical parts here, resistors, capacitors, diodes, a bunch of extra chips for doing board repair. And up here is all incandescent bulbs. I'm not a fan of LEDs, so I still use incandescent bulbs in all my pinball restorations. Then here's another tool that I didn't buy right away, but I'd highly recommend this. This is the Harbor Freight ultrasonic cleaner. Comes in really handy for cleaning all your parts, especially cleaning all your parts before you put them in the tumbler. If you don't clean your parts before you put them in the tumbler, it'll contaminate your media. So if you run it through the ultrasonic cleaner first, dry it off, put it in your tumbler, your tumbling media will last a lot longer. And then for the vibrating tumbler, the media I use is mainly walnut media. So this is this brand is KT. You can either get it from Amazon or your local pet shop. It is basically pet bird litter. There's also lizard litter. It's basically just bed lining for your cage for your animal. You can get a big bag like this. It usually costs like 15 bucks or something. And then I also sometimes use corn cob media. So this is, got this off of Amazon. quick and easy brass cleaning media. It's not as coarse as the walnut shells. It actually gives you a little more of a higher polish, so a lot of times I'll use the corncob media as a second stage. I'll run the walnut shells first and then the corncob media. Then next to that, I just got a vise mounted on a pedestal so I can move that around wherever I need it in the shop. Vise always comes in handy. And then a couple milk crates bolted to the wall to hold either shipping blankets that I use to either cover things to protect them in the garage, or of course when I go to move a pinball machine, pick up a pinball machine, I'll bring some of these shipping blankets with me to protect the cabinet. And then this next one is the rags that I reuse. I keep them here, and then as they get dirty I'll run them through the washing machine while the wife's not around. And then I have a very important little sticker on here that says do not use for pre-paint. I made that mistake myself, which is most of these rags are covered in silicone products, being wax or some kind of other cleaners that have silicone in them. And even though you run them through the washing machine, that towel is still impregnated with that chemical. So if you use it for pre-paint, you're going to contaminate the surface that you're painting, and you'll end up with fish eyes or other nasty stuff in your finish, and you'll have to sand it down and repaint it. And then of course I always have some cardboard so I can lay it on the ground and paint something without painting the floor. And then towards the back of the shop here, I just have some metal shelves that hold a bunch of chemicals, and on this side another metal shelf that holds different paint supplies and cleaning supplies, and my mean green. I kind of swear by mean green as opposed to other purple cleaners that a lot of people use. I've always been real pleased with mean green. It's cheap. You get it at Dollar General. So hanging up here, this is a little light box that I made. This is a light box that I use for having to repaint back glasses. It's just got two little under-counter fluorescent lights in it and some felt on top of the wood frame to protect the back glass. So I can put the back glass on that light box and be able to see how my paint looks when it's backlit. And then I've continued the pegboard all the way across. I actually just put this pegboard up recently, that's why it's not fully populated with tools at the moment. And then here are my grinders, buffers, and a drill press. And these are mounted on, these stands are the Harbor Freight, I think they're called heavy duty bench grinder stands. They're about $45 or so, and they are super heavy duty, and they do not move. So this is a grinder that's set up with a stone on one side and a wire wheel on the other side. The wire wheel is good for cleaning up rusty metal parts, bolts, cleaning up threads, stuff like that. And the grinding stone is good for all kinds of metal work. Next to that is the Harbor Freight. This is the 6-inch buffer. I actually don't recommend this one. It just doesn't have enough power. It's pretty easy to stall it out. But it does work good. I would suggest getting the 8-inch buffer if you're going to get your buffer from Harbor Freight. The 8-inch buffer should have a lot more power, but either way, on one side is the stiff sewn buffing pad, and on the other side is the loose. So above that buffer, I just have some extra buffing pads because they do wear out, and the rouge that I use to buff the parts. I mainly use white. White is the high gloss polish. There's also a green, which is for stainless steel, so that comes in useful for pinball side rails and lock bars. Next to that is the Harbor Freight. I believe it's the smallest or the second smallest drill press that they make. Doesn't get it used a lot in pinball. It's really handy for drilling out rivets. Another good tool, a little on the expensive side, but if you need to rivet ramp flaps and other plastics that need to be riveted together, this is the kit from pinrestore.com. Basically, you can either buy it complete, or this is an arbor press from Harbor Freight, and then he sells the kit to convert this into a rivet press, all the parts you need and the instructions to make that into a rivet press. And then here is just this is a little fold-in card table type table, and this is what I use as I'm disassembling a cabinet or a playfield. I'll assemble the dirty parts on this table and document where everything goes, and then as I clean it, I'll move it to another table or another workbench. So for lighting, I've added a lot of lights as I go. These are just the cheap fluorescent lights, T12s, 4 feet lengths. I always wanted to upgrade to LEDs, but it would just be too cost prohibitive for me. I get these 2 bulb 4-foot T12 assemblies from Lowe's. They're $11, and then you buy a contractor pack of T12 bulbs. It costs about $10 or $11 for a box of 10, so you can't beat the cost. So that was a walk all the way around the shop, so that leaves the middle of the shop, which I typically leave clear as I need to pull my race car in here when I'm not working on pinball machines. But that allows the middle to be nice and open, so when I'm working on a pinball cabinet or a head, I can move it right into the middle of the shop and have full access to walk around. And the cart is the Harbor Freight, the lower capacity Harbor Freight lift table. I just made a couple wood skids there so that the lift table is not on the bottom of the cabinet, where it can blow out the bottom of the cabinet on some of the cabinets that have a really thin bottom board. And then the handle mod there is one of the early handle mods. That's just some copper elbow pipe fittings, just to angle that handle back so it clears the cabinet. And this is my roller games cabinet that I've been restoring. I'm actually ready to repopulate everything into that cabinet. And then this is from Harbor Freight. This is I think it's about $45. It's the cheapest roll around service cart that they sell, and it works really good for when you're working on the cabinet. You can put all your tools on here and roll it around, and really convenient to have. So that was a quick walk around tour of my pinball workshop. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll get more in depth on equipment and stuff that I use in future videos. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Please, if you have not subscribed to my channel, please hit the subscribe button, leave any comments and feedback, and thanks for watching.